You've probably heard of Mary Seacole, right? A celebrated hero of the Crimean War. But what if I told you that for an entire century she was completely forgotten? Like, history just erased her. The story of why that happened is fascinating, and it shows you just how fragile a legacy can be. And look, to get a sense of just how big a deal she is today, get this. Back in 2004, there was a poll to find the greatest Black Briton. And who came in at number one? Mary Seacole. I mean, that's an incredible honor. A true national hero. But hold on, that huge recognition today makes you stop and think, right? If she was so celebrated, how on earth did her story just vanish for almost 100 years? It's a real mystery, and the answer tells us so much about how history gets written and, maybe more importantly, how it gets forgotten. Okay, so to really dig into that mystery, we've got to go back, way back. Her life before the war is actually the key to everything. It helps us understand not just her amazing rise to fame, but also the very reason she was nearly wiped from the history books. So Mary was born in Jamaica in 1805. Her mom was a respected healer. They called her a doctress, and that's where Mary learned all about traditional Creole medicine. And this wasn't just book learning. She was out there in the real world, on the front lines of devastating cholera and yellow fever outbreaks, and she was good at it. So by the time the Crimean War kicked off, she was already a seasoned medical pro. Naturally, she travels all the way to London to volunteer her skills, and what happens? She gets rejected, flat out. And it wasn't just one place. Despite her amazing track record, every official body turned her down. And you have to ask why, right? Well, it was a whole cocktail of systemic bias. For starters, she was nearly 50. She didn't have any formal British hospital experience. And let's be honest, she was up against the deeply ingrained racial prejudice of Victorian society. Her practical, hands-on Creole-based knowledge, it was just dismissed by this London establishment that was way more comfortable with the upper-class formal background of someone like, say, Florence Nightingale. So what do you do when every door is slammed in your face, when the system says no? Well, if you're Mary Seacole, you don't just pack up and go home. Nope. You build your own system. She found this incredible entrepreneurial way to get to the front lines anyway, but on her own terms. So check this out. After getting turned down by everyone, she just pivots. She partners up with a relative, funds her own trip, and heads straight for the war zone. Her plan? To open the British Hotel right there in Balaclava, close to the action. The logic was simple. If they wouldn't let her be an official nurse, she was going to become something else entirely. Now, there's a specific word that some people used to describe her back then, a sutler. You might not have heard of it, but a sutler was basically a civilian who followed an army around selling stuff to the troops. Food, drinks, supplies, you name it. And understanding this commercial side of what she did, well, it's absolutely key to understanding her whole story. And this British hotel really shows you the two sides of Mary Seacole. On one hand, it was a business. Let's be clear, it wasn't a hospital. It was more like a high-end restaurant and general store, mostly for the officers. But, and this is the brilliant part, that business was the engine that powered her real mission. She used the profits and her prime location to go right out onto the battlefield, often under fire, to give care and comfort to wounded soldiers of all ranks. That's how she earned the nickname everyone remembers, Mother Seacole. Okay, so this unique entrepreneurial approach she took, it naturally brings up a comparison with the other famous name from the Crimean War, Florence Nightingale. And a lot of people try to frame them as rivals, but that's really missing the point. They were both pioneers, for sure, but they were on two completely different missions. Here's the fundamental difference boiled down. Seacole was all about providing direct, individual comfort and first aid right there on the front lines. Nightingale? Her mission was about large-scale systemic reform of the military hospitals, which were miles away from the actual fighting. And you can actually see this difference in how the media covered them at the time. If you look at the Times newspaper during the war, Florence Nightingale was mentioned more than 7 times as often as Mary Seacole. It's because Nightingale's work was seen as this huge, national, institutional project. Seacole's work, as heroic as it was framed as a much more personal, individual story. So let's just break it down. Seacole's whole operation was commercial. It was improvised, she funded it herself, and she was right there at the front. Her fame was built on her incredible personal bravery. Nightingale, on the other hand, was all about institutional reform. She was state-funded, based in massive hospitals, and her legacy was built on collecting data and driving systemic change. I mean, they were operating in two completely different worlds. And you know what? Understanding this huge difference is what finally cracks the case. It solves the mystery of why she disappeared from history, and it lets us appreciate her for the unique, incredible hero she actually was. So why did her memory fade? It really comes down to one simple thing. For a legacy to last, it usually needs an institution to carry it forward. Seacole's legacy lived on in the personal stories and memories of the soldiers she saved. But Nightingale's legacy, it was literally built into the system. The nursing schools, the government reports, the hospitals she reformed. So when nursing became this standardized, professional, non-commercial field, Seacole's model as a commercial doctress just didn't fit the new mold. After the war, she went bankrupt, and when she died, there was no foundation, no school, no institution left to keep her story alive. And that's why we need to remember her on her own terms, not by trying to fit her into the same box as Florence Nightingale. She wasn't that kind of nurse. She was something else, something totally unique. She was a heroic humanitarian, yes, but also an adventurous doctress and a pioneering entrepreneur. She smashed through the racial, gender, and professional barriers of her time to help people in the only way she could, her own way. You know, rediscovering Mary Seacole's story after it was lost for a century is just incredible. It makes you stop and think. Her history was saved, but it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? Whose stories are still out there, waiting to be rediscovered? Whose histories have we not yet found?